Jeremiah, you missed session number 3, am I right?
Yes. Yes.
Session 1 and 2, you were there.
Yeah.
So just a quick recap. Session number 1, we were introducing what is this work? How was this work discovered? And how Peter, with Aridigos, we were able to identify 5 disciplines that help organizations that went on growing for hundreds of years. What were the key ways of thinking and living that allowed them to do so? And organizations that didn't have those capacities, those 5 disciplines, found it difficult to survive or to be able to keep growing and last for hundreds of years, as some of them have. And that's how these 5 disciplines were identified. We said organizations that survived hundreds of years had 3 core capabilities. They kept an eye on the future, that was the lake of aspirations. They had the capacity to have conversations that allowed them, when they leave the conversations, to see more than when they entered the conversations. And the way they were able to see more was the ability for them to be able to understand another point of view, not just their own. Okay, and there were 2 disciplines that allowed them to do that, and that's the disciplines of mental model and team learning. The 3rd capacity was the ability to understand complexity. When they were faced with issues which is not obvious at the beginning or not obvious by looking at it, they were able to step back as you would step back from your tree to be able to see and understand the forest. And that's the discipline of systems thinking. All right. The first lake, the lake of aspirations, has 2 disciplines. The disciplines of personal mastery and shared vision. And towards the end of, I think that by the 2nd session, we were saying all of these 5 disciplines behave like a 3-legged stool, which means the 3 capabilities must grow at the same strength. They must grow equally. You can't emphasize one at the expense of the other. Okay, so that's what we saw in the 3-legged stool. And we also introduced that each of those disciplines come with a set of tools. And altogether, there were 60 tools that this work covers. Okay, now that's what we did in session number 2. Now, as we did this, we also said the way these 5 disciplines work, there is a particular way that they organize themselves. And one way to look at it is through the idea of what we call a structural tension model. It's a concept which Robert Fritz introduced in the discipline of personal mastery. So we're going to try and relate to that. So systems thinking. So this is part of the homework. I don't know if, because right now I'm not sure how much you all are paying attention to these notes on the OneDrive, because it's meant to guide you as to what we did and what was the homework. Okay, so I'm looking at this particular homework. How do the 5 disciplines work together? Can you see this question here? How do the 5 disciplines work together? So here's what I expect when we finish each session. The intersession work, or what we call the homework, will be captured there. Look at it, be prepared for it for the next session. Has anyone had a go at this question?
Again, is there anyone who have what?
Who had tried out that question? How do these 5 disciplines work together?
Yeah, I think last time we discussed this already. Yeah, the connection between the discipline. Yeah.
So let's try it for 1 minute, so for Jeremiah's benefit, so that he gets to catch up for and be ready for today. What do you remember? Anybody? So systems thinking, if you remember the leg, which leg does systems thinking talk to? Remember the 3 legs on the stool? Yes?
Yeah.
Systems thinking talks to which capacity?
It's about understanding complexity.
Very nice. Okay. Where do we see complexity? The past is behind us. We're not looking at it. Future is not in front of us. We're not looking at it. Where do we experience complexity?
The now, the current situation.
The present, right?
Presence, yes.
How do we understand complexity? Before the conversations we've had as a globe around global warming, for example, what did we experience? We saw sea levels rising. We saw rains stopping for long periods and lands are experiencing droughts. Or the other extreme, they were experiencing heavy rains and flooding. Yes, lands being washed, landslides, topsoil being removed, farming land is being reduced. That's what we were facing, right? Now, what were we facing it as? Did we understand it, or we were facing events?
Event.
We were facing events. So if you remember the definition of systems thinking, which we covered last week, systems thinking is to see and understand patterns, looking beyond events. Isn't it? Looking beyond events. So before we apply systems thinking, our natural behavior to our present is events. That's our natural. Our eyes pick up, somebody bangs the door, it's an event. All right. What does systems thinking do? Looks beyond that event, steps away from the tree so that we can understand the interrelationships that are happening as a forest that influences my tree.
Yes.
Or my tree causes an influence on the forest. Okay, so what's the purpose of systems thinking? To understand our current reality. Not just see its events, but to understand it as we would see the forest. What about the first leg, the leg of aspirations? It's supported by 2 disciplines. The disciplines are personal mastery and shared vision. Personal mastery is clarifying my personal vision. But if we have to work with others, it doesn't matter at what space, as my partners, as my family, as a community, as a district, as a nation, as a world, all right? In order to build a shared vision, we each need to be clear about our personal vision so that we can figure how the shared vision looks like. Each one of our personal visions is the window to what is the potential of the shared vision. If not, you'll find that what we think is a vision is reduced to a goal, which is often moved by some kind of fear. fear of failure or fear of rejection or fear of death. And it's often pushed by individuals, certain persons, because they want to show a force. That space doesn't allow us to build shared vision. It doesn't encourage personal visions. So in the lake of aspirations, we drop the ideas of a picture that is driven by fear, and instead pictures that are created in the space that says, what do I care to create? Not what do I want? It's not just what do I want? What do I care to create and bring to reality? What is it I care about? So that's the lake of aspirations. Now, those conversations that you just heard, which reality are we looking at? Past, present, future? What do I care to create?
Is the future one.
I am doing it now, but for which reality?
Yeah, future.
Future. I may be doing it now, that's my actions, but based on a picture of the future.
Yeah.
Is that okay? So if that
Yes.
picture is not clear, would our hands know what to do?
Yes.
No.
If that picture is not clear,
Not clear. Yeah.
okay, our hands wouldn't know what to do. Now, this is a tool that I use. It's just a washer and a string. And it's a way of training us to recognize the part of the mind that is able to clarify the pictures of the future. And the way this works is, I'm not going to show too much about it at this point is, but if you start imagining that you see this, this washer is moving from left to right.
Mm.
Now, it's because you can't see my whole body. It's a little bit hard, but I want you all to try it. It's called a Chevreul's pendulum. I will try and put some links on these session overviews that shows that the moment I begin to imagine this washer on the string is moved left to right, you'll see the pendulum stop and it starts moving left to right. And you didn't even move anything intentionally. Like you didn't tell your finger, I'm going to swing. No, you just imagine what the picture is. You don't give instructions. That's the space of personal mastery. That picture has to be clear. If the picture is not clear, the body doesn't know what to do.
Mm.
Okay, so this is, so I will try and leave some links here so that you all can go and check it up. Create your own pendulum, as we call it, a Chevreul's pendulum. At a future session, we'll go a little bit more deep on this. But for the purpose of understanding how do the 5 disciplines work together, personal mastery and shared vision is clarifying pictures of my future reality. Systems thinking is clarifying the pictures of the current reality. Now, I can see my personal picture, and I also need to understand each other's picture so that we can build this at a shared space. Systems thinking, when it is reinforcing positively, builds a shared vision. So I'm going to leave you with that statement. I don't want to say more, but we'll bring back this statement in the future. There is a practice of systems thinking in the future, but that's after we have uncovered the structure. Okay, now, what happens when...
Stila.
Yes, Huda?
Sorry, it was fast. I want to catch the statement. I want to write down.
Which part? So I said systems thinking It is to understand why things are not working today. That's the purpose of systems thinking. Right? It is to understand. Understand what? Understand what is not working. Okay? Often it is a negative reality. Global warming. Okay, climate change. It's negative reality.
Yeah.
When we have uncovered the causality and we begin to turn that causality around from its negative form to its positive form, we're now building a shared vision, which is a positive form of the reality. So there is a practice of systems thinking in shared vision, but in its positive form. So systems thinking doesn't just stop with current reality.
Oh, okay.
Okay. All right. So there is a practice, but for us to see the positive form, we use the current reality to uncover the structure first so that we know what it looks like in its positive form. Okay. So we have clarified our current reality through systems thinking. We clarified our future reality through personal mastery and shared vision. Of course, the conversations that allow us to do that is the second leg. Mentor models and team learning. The capacity to have generative conversations allow us to clarify our current reality and our future reality. The moment these 5 disciplines come together that way, automatically it creates what's called a tension. Because I'm clear about my current, I'm clear about my future. It sets up a tension for us to figure out. Now we want to figure out, how do we want to move from here to there? If we don't have this drive to move forward, that tension is not felt, it means the 5 disciplines are not yet working together. They're asleep. Wake them up. Questions?
Yes, I have the questions.
Yes.
So in order to create the shared vision or personal mastery, does it have to start with understanding the current realities, or this process can happening at the same time? Like, do we need to really have the clear understanding of the current realities, then we can talk about the future? So which one may go first?
It's okay to let them go together. It's okay. Because what it does is it helps us to check back our personal visions to see if it's truly embedded in the question, what I care to create, or is it a way to run away from something I don't like? Sometimes we clarify a vision because we want to run away from something we don't like, right? So it's okay to practice personal mastery. Keep a journal, write it down somewhere, or take note of where you're thinking, what does your thinking look like? As you clarify your current reality and your fears start to reduce, because that's what systems thinking does, it reduces your fears. As it reduces your fears, you go back again to personal mastery and says, now what do I care to create? You may find a different answer. And you have now a choice. And there is freedom when you have a choice. Isn't it? When you don't have a choice, you don't know you don't have freedom. You don't know that you made a choice intentionally. Okay, so it's okay to clarify your personal visions, even though you have not yet finished work on systems thinking. Do them parallel. as you clarify your current reality, go back again to personal mastery and check, is this vision still something I care about, or do I see something else now?
Mm.
And then I make an intentional choice. And if everybody did that, then we know that our personal vision is not rooted in fear. It is couched in a space of what do I care to create, not what am I running away from? So how do they dismiss? I like your question. I think the question behind your question is there an order in which the 5 disciplines need to be practiced? Not necessarily. What you need to do is to know the 5 disciplines really well so that you're able to move between them at any point. The ability to move between them is very important, and to go back and forth. Do you just clarify for yourself, or do you also work and facilitate clarity for those around you? Some may not know the tools. So you play the role of a trainer of the disciplines. Help them understand the tools, like what the experience you're going through now. At other times, you act as a facilitator. Hold the container, hold the space to say, what do you care to create? And be able to ask a question, check if that clarity, is it couched in fear or out of care?
Mm.
Okay, that's the role of a facilitator. So there are 3 players in this work. There is a trainer, there's a facilitator, and then we call a steward. A steward is someone who holds the space for the larger community, for everyone who is in the community as well as everyone outside the community. How do we connect and plug with all of us? And creates a space where the trainer and facilitator does their work. So steward, trainer, facilitator. What's their role? At every time the community is living in that space of tension, where they're clear about their current reality and they're clear about their future reality. And they're in a space to figure out how they want to get there. When they get there, it's no longer future, it's current. So what happens next? I'm now 10 kilometers from where I was previously. Where I was previously, I couldn't see 20 kilometers away. I could see 10. But now at the 10th kilometer mark, I can begin to see at the 20 kilometer mark. What's that future reality? So that space where we continue to clarify what is our current reality, what's our future reality, is how these 5 disciplines are working together. Okay, someone who's practicing this, it doesn't mean that they don't fall into depression, but if they did, they have the tools to know how to get out of it. They become aware of themselves. Where am I? What's driving me? What's motivating me? That's so. The 5th discipline is more than just saying there's 5 disciplines, there's personal mastery, mentor. No, it's in the practice of the tools. So the purpose of, well, the teaser doesn't do everything. It's just giving you a glimpse of what these 5 disciplines are. But as you go through a proper training, the integration of those tools of the work becomes your practice.
Mm.
Right? And that's how you'll be able to know, how do you lift that tension and work with that tension. Now, when you lift that tension, what kind of tension do you think? Now, the word tension is, it doesn't have a very positive connotation to it, does it? Yeah, it makes it feel like it's something you shouldn't be dealing with. I'm having tension, meaning I'm having a bad day. Is that what we mean here?
Yes, it's not like stress. There's a stress and pressure there.
Okay, so let me do something. I realize I need a device. Would you give me a minute just to get a device?
Yes, sure.
I'm coming. So this is my device.
The rubber band.
A rubber band.
Okay, rubber.
All
Okay.
right, so you will you will also try it out yourself. What does a tension in a rubber band do to us? If I don't understand current reality, there's nothing. Am I motivated? I'm
No.
clear about my future, but I don't know where I am.
Yeah.
Okay. Or I'm so bogged down with my current reality, even though I understand, I'm not clear about my future reality.
Yes.
What's happening to the rubber band? Does it do anything for us?
No.
Not really. What is the purpose of the 5 disciplines?
Oh, to make tension then.
It's to create that feel of pull. Am I
pull.
being pushed or it's a pull?
Pull.
It's a pull. If
Right.
somebody has to push me, the 5 disciplines are not working.
Right.
It's that pull that you feel. So I rather than use the word tension, I would rather say structural pull model rather than use the word tension.
Right.
It's a pull. If you remember the experience when the US wanted to put a man on the moon, the way the whole nation rallied, the way they were pulled to that vision to see a man on the moon, right? Do you think when they worked 25 hours a day, it was too much for them?
No, no.
There was no tension. It was a pull. That's it. That's the purpose of the 5 disciplines. If you find the team needs to be pushed, the 5 disciplines are not working.
Oh
Then
my
what do
God.
you do? Yes, you go back to the 3 roles, the steward, the trainer, the facilitator,
Oh, okay.
so that the understanding of the 5 disciplines is embedded in the organization, so that they understand how to practice these tools until the point that they are able to feel that pull.
Yes, understand.
That's the purpose of how the 5 disciplines work together. Huda, did you raise your hand?
Yeah. Yes. Oh, all right. I think you're talking about me. I think this lately I was a person of pushing, and it's make me stressful, and it doesn't work at all. When you mentioned the 3 roles, is it the same person, or it should be shared work with other people, Sila?
It depends on the scope. If you're dealing with a small group, then the 3 roles are in one person, but you're conscious
1%.
about the group. Okay, because
Oh,
at
right.
some point you wear the hat of a trainer and says, here's the ladder of inference, here's how it works. Okay, or here's the balancing loop, this is what it looks like. Okay, or here is fixes that backfire. This is how you recognize that archetype in your reality. That's a trainer. Okay, what's a facilitator? Here's a point of view. Here's another point of view, right? As a facilitator, you may have your own point of view as well, but you showcase how you set aside your view in wanting to understand a view that is different. That's not a trainer, that's a facilitator. So the more you showcase that, or you help each other to see differences in their points of view. Sometimes somebody suppresses their view because they don't want to show they are different. Maybe there are norms that doesn't encourage that. Okay, so a facilitator creates a safe space where those conversations may happen. If we don't have enough of those conversations, the lower part, so-called lower part of the structure will always blame the upper part, and the upper part will always blame and there's no other way out of it. It cannot see the forest. It only sees the one that is hurting them. You okay with that? Okay, that's the role of a facilitator. Steward, what does a steward do? He's probably at a space where he can see the forest, and he wants to see the forest beyond the mandate or the scope of the team or the organization. So he also connects with the larger community. The more we have people who does that role, the more we can see and understand the issues at a global space. A lot of issues increasingly have got that domino that is happening at a global space. If we don't have stewards at that space, countries will collapse, countries will struggle to be where others can be more easily. It's because we don't have enough of those stewards. Okay, so the larger the scope is, the more divided this role is. Usually the trainer goes up front, is the one that leads up front. Steward would be there to create a safe space where those works can happen. The facilitator comes behind the trainer. Now, why do we need the trainer? Remember, we started off by saying that Peter Senge, although he didn't say it himself, the 5 disciplines represent an antithesis. Most concepts of management as we know it today. So the training is to help someone who's been used to a form of management to be able to work their way to the antithesis. Now, what does antithesis mean? This is how we've always done things. What's the antithesis? Here's how it needs to be very different. Okay, so in order to do that turnaround, that's the role of the trainer. You don't say, how can I adapt to today? That's not what this work is about. So usually we say, carry on with whatever we are doing today, build this capability on the side, and then help it to grow. And as it grows, it takes over and this one falls off. So it's not blended. Clear? How do the 5 disciplines work together?
Yeah.
So
it
is it
brings change.
structural tension? Is it structural tension model?
Yes.
It's called structural pull
Yeah.
model. That's the new name. I
Oh.
just coined it today.
Oh, structural pull model.
Pull model.
Right. Wow. It is a
So instead of
structural pull model
pull,
to see the change.
yes, to pull from where we are to where we want to be. It's the pull. It's not a push. Push means somebody is driving you to where he or she wants to go.
Yes, and sometimes don't have understanding.
Yes, and then that's not the space of shared vision. It's not a push. Otherwise, that discipline is not yet active. It's lame. It's like this, flat. Okay, so keep this device and this device handy near you just to keep reminding you. All right, everyday things. Whenever okay. So keep these devices just as a reminder. Put it somewhere and say, the structural pull model, right? All right. How do I clever? And then try and get this, just a washer and a knitting thread, and practice that. Okay, so that you begin to access the part of the mind that does the clarifying of the vision. And you see how automatic that the washer starts to move in any direction you set your mind to. The more you practice, the faster the response. Okay?
Question, Sila.
Yes.
Sila, when we talk about the current reality, it is about understanding the complexity and shared vision, and also the future reality. It is about I think the personal mastery and shared vision.
Right.
And where is the mental model and what is number one? Team learning then.
Okay. What do you think?
It is in the process of understanding complexities where we tries to see the mental models and we share generate the learning and understand different views of the group about the realities.
Okay.
It's the glue that helps us see a different reality and therefore be able to see the forest. In a causal structure, we are seeing the forest, but it's made up of many trees. In order for me to see another tree, that's where mental models team learning comes in. Without which, it won't be easy to practice systems thinking, it won't be easy to practice shared vision. You get it? And again, you will find there is no pull in the structure. So these are ways you diagnose which disciplines are not active. Okay. Then last week, we went into the definition of systems thinking. Okay, so we're going to go back there. I'm going to share the screen. And this is where my blog is. And we get to this. Chapter 2, the 3 core learning capabilities. You remember the 3 legs as we talked about it?
Yeah.
Now, you notice on the side, we all go through development stages. Okay, so be prepared. You think we got everything at this stage, but the more we are with the work, we move to another level and we realize we're seeing even more things about the tools or about what the tools allow us to see. So the more we are with work, we move to higher levels of competency of the work. Yesterday or a few days ago, I was having a conversation with somebody in Europe. And he says, you know, Sheila, I've been with you for about 3 years. I just realized now that what I thought I knew in the first year was nothing compared to what I know now. And I still think I don't know a lot of things. Do you see
Yes.
what's going on here? We go through that process. So be prepared for that. And it's a good sign. It's a good sign that we have left something behind and we're moving forward. It's okay. All right. So let me just move out of this. And we talked about the tools of this work. These are the various tools. So when we go through a training program, a trainer then takes these different tools and help someone understand how do you practice them. The practice of learning organization is in the practice of the tools. It's not at the level of the discipline. It's not the level of the legs of the stool. It's not enough to just to do that. Understand the tools, understand its practice. We practice learning organization. So then last week, we came to the definition of systems thinking. So if you go to this page, the first paragraph, so quite a bit of the information, I extracted from the book itself, so that it is word for word the way Peter had presented the discipline. And he said, in the case of, so now we're going into one of the disciplines. So the sessions we had last session and this session is going into the disciplines. And we said systems thinking is, and what's the discipline? In seeing and understanding patterns or the forest, looking beyond events, which means looking beyond my tree to deeper structures that are controlling my tree and discovering the leverage that lies hidden in these structures. If I'm not able to change things from my perspective, there is a perspective I'm not seeing where if I could see that, that could be a place where I can start to change the reality. Now, structures here refer to the system archetypes. Okay, so going back to here, when we say structures, it refers to this set of tools here. That's what structures refer to. Your drifting goals, your escalation, fixes that backfire, limits to growth. All these are your structures that control your events. And the way to get to the structures is to first see and understand patterns. What does patterns mean? What does patterns mean?
Patterns,
So,
yes.
Can you give me 1 minute? I want you to leave you with that question. I just need to attend to the gate. Somebody's at the gate. Would you look at that question? See and understand patterns. What does that mean?
Okay. Jerry, what is that? Seeing and understanding pattern.
Why you suddenly poke me? I don't know. I think some things that happens again and again in terms of events, maybe. You can see it has similarity when it happened again. Maybe the causality or something else.
Okay.
If y'all get a chance to talk about it, what does see and understand patterns mean?
I think,
Patterns. Yes, Jeremy. Go ahead.
yeah, maybe seeing and understanding patterns means we can we can see that there are things that reoccurs again and again, and we also understand why it happens, like why it reoccurs.
Okay. So to you, a pattern means if something happens at this point in time, and after some point in time, it happens again. And then
Yeah.
after some point in time, it happens again. You're seeing something is recurring. Is that what you meant by pattern?
Yeah.
Okay. Reactions?
No, I think I just want to add. I think I agree. It's with Jeremy. It's about repetition, and at the same time, the pattern also reflecting the change over time. Yeah. So, like for example, we see the business, like we analyze on the business the performance, right? We can see that sometimes it's up and sometimes go down, and keep repeating. And then there's a period of times in both. Yeah. So it's about
Yes.
the change over time, and that also include the interconnection of different events, right? Like for example, we talk about revenues, right? Like it's declining, and the revenues declining by itself. That should be the connection with the other reason as well. Yeah.
Very nice. Very nice. Good. Any other reactions? Now, in systems thinking, when we say patterns, can you see this picture here? Okay. Now, can you hear me?
Yes. Yes. We can see your graph.
Yes. Now, Jeremy, when you see something recurring, you saw this, something was going up, then it was going up further, then it was going up further. Whenever it goes high and we notice it, it's called an event. Right? What's the difference between seeing those peaks and seeing those patterns? What's the difference? So
Can you say it again?
at
What's
a
the difference
peak,
between?
we often feel a pain. Prices are too high. I can't buy much. Okay. It's a pain. Okay. What's the difference between seeing an event and seeing a pattern?
I think event is like we see the peak, right? The peak or the bottom.
Uh-huh.
why we see the pattern. We see that the dark peak or bottom keep recurring again and again.
Yes. It tells a story. It's like watching the movie. It's not just wherever there's a crisis. If, let's say, we had a movie that only showed crisis points, would we understand the movie?
No.
That's how we tend to live our reality. Systems thinking is in being able to see the movie. It helps us better understand what's causing that pattern. That we are not living from snapshot to snapshot. When a reporter makes an article in the newspaper, he or she is describing an event. They may point fingers because so-and-so said this, so-and-so did that. Okay, but it's whose perspective? Of the reporter.
Yes.
Systems thinking must be able to go beyond that. So sometimes, I run groups for farmers because of my agriculture work. And then sometimes I'll see somebody post an article pointing fingers at somebody for doing something, and it feels like it's unfair. So as a systems thinker, what's the first thing you say?
What caused it?
Well, yes, but first I need to verify. Whose point of view is this? And how is this verified? Because if somebody takes us on a ride because they have a personal vengeance against somebody, they're not presenting the whole story, it has not been verified. Unless the person whom they're talking about is saying something in the same room, I usually don't allow such conversations. And I'll say very politely, and I'll say, there's probably another platform better suited for this conversation, but this platform is not cut out for that, so that we don't encourage such conversations. Otherwise, we will just live from snapshot to snapshot. And we react to those snapshots. So systems thinking is to be able to see change, see the reality as if the way a camera, as a video camera would behave, as opposed to a still camera. And if we find that in trying to understand a reality, we can't see the movie, we can't practice this discipline. And so for me, one of the easiest way to practice systems thinking is I start with graphs like this. I try to find as many graphs as possible. Because graphs can't lie. Statistics can lie, but graphs can't lie. So in order for us to see these graphs, yes, sometimes most of us won't have access to such kind of data, which is why it's important that this work also is done jointly with agencies like government, because they generally tend to have data that cuts across the country. Much better than specific organizations can do.
Yeah, understand.
Okay, then here's taking that definition to the next step. It says the essence of the discipline lies in a shift of mind to see interrelationships rather than linear cause-effect chains. What's a chain? What's a chain?
Chain is like a circle, right? Is it?
It's chains are usually a straight line. Okay, usually it's a straight line. But the definition says, but the essence lies in a shift of mind from seeing straight line causality, just like how our eye sees in a straight line, okay, to see interrelationships. Now, what does interrelationships look like? When there's interrelationship, what do you notice?
I think there's a loop involved. Something happens and then it's backfire. Yeah.
So when something is interrelated, let's say I take two objects, okay, when they're interrelated, when this changes, we see the effect it has on another. Okay, now if I see the effect this has on this, is that interrelationship or is that linear?
It's
A
linear.
caused
Linear.
B. It's linear. Very good.
Yeah.
Interrelationship. So I'm at A. I'm at A. I see when I do this, it has that effect on B. All right. I can see that. What is it I cannot see?
I don't see B is also in fact on A.
Aha. What I cannot see is, but because when B changes, what impact does it have on A? Or I might see the impact, but I cannot see how my actions impact the other. So in systems thinking, our seeing doesn't stop until we see a circle of causality. If we can't see the dots join into a circle, as long as it doesn't join into a circle, it's linear. I'm trying to bring on the whiteboard. I hope it works. It's exciting for me to bring a whiteboard in. Okay. You see the whiteboard yet?
Yes, coming.
Okay, very nice. Okay, so if I have, let me see if I can do. Yeah. So if I have, if I have A causes B, yeah, good, causes C, causes D, looks like I've gone far, isn't it? Right? Do I have interrelationships yet?
Not yet.
Until when would I see the interrelationship?
Until either we see the connection, probably
So I have
between D
I
to
need to
A.
see an arrow come back from D to A. If I don't see an arrow come back from D to A, I don't have interrelationships. So I have to keep going. I have to look for E. Now, by the time I get to E, I'm no longer in Botswana. I have to be in Australia to see E. But I have to make that effort to see that. Then I have to go to New Zealand and to Peru before I'm able to come back and see A. And if I don't do that, I don't have interrelationships. Interrelationship, I must see the domino that I caused to drop. How did it come back and affect me? That's the essence of the discipline. It lies in a shift of mind to see linear cause effect, to see interrelationships. Now, because everybody has to go home at 5 o'clock, they may not be able to go all the way up to F. They go home, they deal with another situation, they come back next day, there's another problem on the table. So we keep putting these aside. But what does the discipline say? The essence is a shift of mind from linear cause effect to see interrelationships. If that mind doesn't shift to see that, we're not yet practicing this discipline. To see the discipline lies in a shift of mind rather than see snapshots, to see change as a process. I must be able to watch the movie leading me to the next crisis, not just the next crisis. The mind must be able to see that. If I can't see what's developing to the next crisis, I'm not yet practicing the discipline. Any questions?
So actually,
So-
by nature, I'm sorry. So actually, by nature, right? The system, the pattern or the system should be the interrelation loop, right? It's not the linear one.
Not the linear one. So if
So it does
you,
mean, yeah. So it does mean when we practice this, or we look
Yes.
into, we understand the complexity or system thinking or whatever, we need to
Exactly.
find what's the loop in place.
Exactly. So if, for example, this is an archetype, right? But if I don't see the entire loop, I stop halfway and I can't see how it comes back, then my mind has not shifted to see the forest. I'm still seeing the trees. And I'm not seeing the interrelationship between them. If I don't go all the way, so the purpose of the archetype is to give us a template that helps our mind to cause that shift. These are natural templates that Peter and his team has identified that explains most kinds of dynamic complexities that we face. And the way to uncover these archetypes is through these patterns. If I see this behavior when I plot that variable over time, that factor over time, then I know which archetype is present. I use that to look for the interrelationship. So half of the work of systems thinking is practically done. It's really for us to internalize these templates so that we use them like lenses, like your magnifying lens, to look for these interrelationships, to look for these processes of change and not get stuck with snapshots.
May I share
Yes.
something on this?
Yes, please.
Um,
Okay.
I think probably in the past, I find the issue that when we look into this archetype, right? Like for example, we talk about escalation. So when we touch upon to the issue, it's also very easy that I can get trapped into this kind of escalation archetype. So what I'm saying is that like archetype can be dangerous in the way that it can be a one mental model, right? So, so the issue may not be escalation archetype, but it can be reflecting in the archetype. So sometimes what I'm saying is that sometimes we may like our understanding about the archetype can trap myself.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. So tell me, when you describe it's a trap, can you explain to me what that trap feels for you?
So that means I don't have the specific example for now. But what I'm
Yes.
saying, like for example, when we talk about peace building, right? So normally it's an escalation archetype, right? And we talk about these communities escalate with the other communities. And then when we understand the issue, we try to look for the competitors out there. But then the root cause can be somewhere else. But I because I know this archetype is apply for example like war situation. So I'm trapped, stuck into only one. But it can be it can be the other reinforcing loop or balancing loop.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Well,
the mind is around one archetype instead of look beyond.
looking beyond it.
Yeah.
Very nice. Here's the thing. If the discipline is internalized, and I think, Tuanan, you may be familiar with the onion. I may have spoken to you about the onion before.
Yes.
Yes. Before the escalation archetype is this one. Okay, let me just blow it up. Okay. Before the escalation archetype, there's another one. You understand? Success to the successful.
Yes.
There's also others, and there's an order in which they happen. So what I do is, if I see, there's two things that we work this. One is I look for other archetypes before escalation. That's reinforcing escalation. Ramya, this may seem a bit advanced, but stay with this. I'm not going to take too long. So one is I look for the other archetypes before and after escalation, and we need to reveal all of them. That's one way you get out of the stuckness of escalation. Two, what is the purpose of knowing it's an escalation archetype? What does the escalation archetype say? But once you start, it does not stop, isn't it? So what should we do with that archetype if you're in it? Never let it start. But if it starts, don't add to its continuity. It's tough. Yes, but that's what the archetype says. Okay, so we don't react. You okay with that? Okay, so that's how you would then work this in. So usually, yes, if there's an escalation archetype, there are things happening before that. And remember, in the case of the onion, it's not just one layer of a circle across all archetypes. It's like a spiral. So you have one onion and then another onion and another onion. There is that process also happening. So the more we have people who understand this work, we can figure out that spiral as well. So Jeremiah, this is a bit advanced. Tuanan has been with me for more than 10 years. So obviously he's been trying it out, and it's just a response to where he is at this point. Okay, right. Any questions? Any other questions? Right. Now, I'm going to use this understanding of interrelationships to introduce what's called the building blocks of systems thinking. And after I introduce the building blocks, I'm going to give you some assignments so that you can work it over the next session. I need somebody to track what those assignments are, so to make sure it's uploaded on the tables. And then I want us to take some time to begin to notice when we say complexity, there are two kinds of complexity. Systems thinking addresses one of them, but not designed for the second one. So I want to end off with that today. But let me take this and build the building blocks of systems thinking. So we're going back to the whiteboard. It's exciting. The first time I'm using a whiteboard, and so happy that it can show up. Okay. Okay. We're going to talk to, whenever we practice systems thinking, there are only two types of interrelationships, or what we call circles of causality. There's nothing else. Every time when we work a circle of causality, it has to be one of these two, and we're going to introduce what they are. Jeremiah, you ready?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so here we go. All right, so to make it simple, I'm going to introduce two parts to the circle of causality. Let's call it A and B. All right. The way A and B interrelates with each other, there's only two ways this can behave. What are the two ways? So I would like you all to write A and B on your notebook. I'm going to, all right, that's an interrelationship between A and B. Doesn't matter which way A is going. Let's say A increases. It has an impact on B. Doesn't matter which way it is, but let's assume because A increased, it caused B to also increase with time. When it comes back as a result of this change, there's only two ways A can react, or not A can react. There's only two ways it has not react, but it has an impact on A. If it has no impact, then there's no interrelationship between A and B. Is there? If a change in B does not have an impact on A, there's no interrelationship between A and B. When is it that it has an impact on A? It causes A to go in the direction it's already heading, or it causes A to reverse. There's only two ways. Is there any other way? It either cause it to go in the direction it's already heading, or it reverses it. Now, assuming it causes A to increase over time, what would the behavior of okay. If it causes A to increase with time, every time A and B interrelates with each other, what would happen to A with time? What would the graph look like?
It's going up.
It's going
Or-
upwards, right? Every time A increases, B increases, therefore A increases even further. Therefore B increases, therefore A increases even further. When the interrelationship has this behavior, this pattern over time, then we say this is a reinforcing loop. What's the other pattern?
Is it balancing loop?
Yes, but let's look at the behavior first.
It's going down.
So what would that behavior look like? I want you all to give it a shot before I reveal it and show it on your screen. What would the pattern look like?
So you want me to
If
draw
it
it?
reverses and go downwards, that is still reinforcing. It's just
Yes.
reinforcing negatively. It's still growing,
Yes.
right? But this one says there are only two ways circles of causality can behave. It causes A to go in the direction it's already heading, or it causes A to reverse or move away from the direction it was heading. It's not growing.
Yes.
What would the pattern look like?
So maybe I draw.
Go ahead.
So let's say A, and then impact on B, and then B increase. Well, how can I draw? How to draw?
And then it causes A to decrease.
Yes, call A to decrease. It's
Right?
like
But
a C.
A didn't want to decrease. A wanted to go up.
Yes.
And it stopped A from going up. It's asked to go somewhere else.
Yes.
When does that happen? That's because A represents a gap between not yet how feel it is. Between yeah, okay, that's because A represents, can you see? Is it showing on the screen?
It's showing the gap as two arrows. Up and down.
Yes. You can see it. So A represents a gap between a goal and actual. Is this working? Is this working for us?
Yes.
Okay, you've got to zoom out. Huh? All of you just do a zoom out.
Yes.
Can you all see now?
Okay.
A represents a gap between where things are today, actual, and an intended goal of the system. It is a controlled A. All right. And so what is the purpose of B? B is to take corrective action so as to move the actual towards the goal. Which means the corrective action will continue until the gap is reduced to 0 and the object or the purpose of this system has moved from actual to the intended goal of the system. So this is a controlled system. An example would be, let's take the air condition. When we set the thermostat, what's the goal? Temperature should be at 22 degrees, for example. Actual, 27. What's the gap? 5 degrees. What is the purpose of the system? Take the corrective action to reduce the temperature in the room from 27 to 22. Now, how do you draw this pattern? What would the pattern look like? Everybody have a go at it? What is the y-axis? Gap. X-axis in systems thinking is always time. How would you draw the behavior for this circle of causality?
Decrease towards 0 over time.
So the gap is reduced. Yes. Somewhere we have to draw. I hang up this. Somewhere we have to draw a line and say that is the goal of the system. What would the pattern look like? At first, when you start, how wide is the gap? It's big. Over time, what's the purpose of this structure? To reduce this gap over time. So what would the pattern look like? Anybody wants to give it a try? Should make this a collaboration. How do I make this collaboration? Next time I'll work it as a collaboration so that you all can also draw. I don't know if that's possible. How would the pattern look like? At first, the gap is wide. So let's say we are somewhere there. What's the purpose of this structure? Get to the goal and maintain stability at the goal. We keep the gap between actual and the goal as narrow as possible. Okay, this may be your iron, you know, the iron that we use for ironing our clothes, right? We want to raise the temperature, right? So that it is able to iron cotton instead of silk. We raise the temperature and it rises until it reaches that temperature. And then what is the purpose of the iron? To maintain that temperature at that. Now, if the iron keeps rising, What do we do with that iron? It's supposed to iron cotton, but now the temperature is going way beyond. It's burning the clothes.
We turn off or reduce.
Or we take it to repair
Mm.
because it's not working the way it should. Okay, but the inherent nature of this structure is what we call a balancing loop. It's doing a correction. It was high, it reduced the gap until it reaches the intended goal of the system. You see what's called a seesaw. Is this system intended to grow? Or is to maintain stability?
Maintain stability.
Maintain.
It's intended to maintain stability. It's not designed for growth. What about an economic system? What do we want to see?
Growth.
Do we want to see a balancing loop? Or we want to see a reinforcing loop?
Normally, we want to see the reinforcing loop.
We want to see a reinforcing loop. That means we want to see this graph.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, you want to see that. But if, let's say today, a table to put your stuff on, decides that it wants to grow and become a chair, will we be happy with it? Or you bought a car, but the car decides it wants to be a motorbike. What is that system designed for? Is it designed for growth, or it's to maintain stability at the intended goal of the system? Its purpose is to keep it for its intended purpose. That's a balancing loop. All causal structures in systems thinking, it's either a balancing loop or a reinforcing loop. There's only two ways circles of causality can behave. There's no third way. Whether it's in time or over time. So whenever we draw a causal structure, whenever we look for interrelationships, as you uncover the circle of causality, check that it's either a reinforcing loop or a balancing loop. And together, these two structures help us to understand complexity. Can I check with the group? Have I explained the difference between dynamic and detailed complexity? Have I done that with you? The example of 9/11?
Not yet.
Not yet, okay. So at 9/11, there were two levels of complexity at play. There was a story going on between Afghanistan or one side of the world and what was going on in the US. There was a story that was happening between the two. Except at the height of terrorism, airports around the world dealt with another type of complexity, which was to prevent someone from going through the airport if his intentions were to cause disruption or cause an act of terror. What were some of the things they had to do? Set up screens to make sure that somebody is not carrying anything that cause some of these acts, prevent certain substances from being carried on board the plane. If someone has a history of being a terrorist, that they are not allowed on the plane. Lots of screenings were happening. Was it simple, or was there a lot of detail? Because imagine if you had 1 million passengers passing through an airport. That's a lot of work. To an officer on the ground, he would say that was complex, too much work. Systems thinking, in the way that Peter defines and he talks about natural templates, it's not talking about what we call detail complexity. That's what was happening at the airports. Systems thinking pays attention to what was the story going on between the East and the West. Now, why is this important? Why is this important? Which one controlled the other? Which one, if it was dealt with, does not cause the other? Do you understand the question, or do I need to clarify the question?
Are you asking? So we were talking about two things, right? One is the pictures between the East and the West, and the other one is the
Yes.
sales operation on the ground, right? And
Yes.
you are asking which one influenced
Which one influenced the other?
Yeah, the East and
Which
the
one
West.
started first?
Yeah, the East and the West.
The East and the West story, right?
Yeah.
And which
Yeah.
archetype? I mean, Tonan, you talked about that archetype a short while ago. What was the archetype that was controlling that behavior between the East and the West? It was your escalation archetype. Right? And as long as that archetype was in charge, was not dealt with, was in control, what was going to happen to the amount of work that was going to happen at the airports? Was it going to go down, or it was going to keep rising?
This keeps rising.
Which one was controlling the other?
The East and the West correlation.
Was controlling. If it dealt with that structure, what's going to happen to the work at the airport?
Yes.
Do you still need to pour resources?
Yeah. No need.
Can you see that detail complexity gets removed, gets eliminated? Dynamic complexities, when not dealt with, creates detail complexity. Systems thinking addresses issues at dynamic complexity. Most practices of systems thinking, as I see it, it's applied at detail complexity. That's not the purpose of learning organization. If we don't pay attention to the dynamic complexity and leave that untouched and let it continue to grow, there's no amount of systems thinking at detail complexity is going to help you, except it's going to sap up all our resources. You will only stop when there's no more money to go forward. There's no more resources to go forward. So when you practice causal diagramming, be clear. Are you working it at detail, or are you working it at dynamic complexity? And if we make that choice to work it at dynamic complexity, That's when system thinking is most effective. Now, as you go through the laws of dynamic complexity, which is the next section, as you see the system archetypes, that's a way for the mind to begin to understand what dynamic complexity looks like and how to work in that space. Now, if you remember the unemployment case study, you remember we started off with unemployment. We talked about the manufacturing and agriculture sectors. And then we landed up at the relationship, yes, between in the family. If the male and the female are not there in the household to groom their children, how difficult it becomes for that economy to build its agriculture and manufacturing sectors. Okay, I can throw in HIV there. When that dynamic complexity is behaving negatively, what do you think will happen to HIV?
Just growing
If
over time.
the family is not intact, family, the male and the female, the husband and wife maintains multiple relationships, what will happen to HIV?
Yes.
You see how it contributes to the rise. So that's where systems thinking is being practiced at that space. As we understand these interrelationships, we begin to know how to deal with, how to improve the standards of education in schools. What's needed to help more of the young people to learn and internalize mathematics and sciences, because it recognizes where that dynamic complexity is coming from. It recognizes the challenges it faces in trying to build its agriculture and manufacturing sector. So is tax incentives the only thing that it can do? It probably needs to do more than that. It may need to bring in and attract persons with skills in those industries to be able to set up those industries in the country, because it is not growing internally. It begins to see other ways on how to deal with that problem. So I brought in this context of dynamic and detailed complexity. Engineering, the way systems thinking applies, tends to focus on detailed complexity and less so on dynamic complexity. So I want us to use this week 2 assignments. So would you all write it down? First assignment, look for examples of dynamic complexity and its corresponding detailed complexity. There's not enough to say, but this is dynamic or this is detailed. So I gave an example of the escalation that was going on between the East and West, and the detailed complexity, which was the levels of screenings required at the airports. That's the detailed complexity that corresponds to that dynamic complexity. So I'd like you to look for examples of detailed complexity and its corresponding dynamic complexity. Put it on the chat, put it on the OneDrive. Examples of what you have found. Second, look for examples of reinforcing loops and balancing loops. Look for circles of causality that speaks to reinforcing, and look for examples of circles of causality that speaks to balancing. Good, thank you, Huda. Would you be taking this to the OneDrive, Buddha?
Yeah. What is number
Good.
number 3, Sila?
No, just 2. 2 in the session works.
Okay.
Tonan, I know you said you had to go soon. Any questions from anybody?
Wow. I like the case study of the detail and dynamic complexity. Even though this is West and East, the impact of the 9/11 was I always got a screening in Singapore and being caught by the immigration because I went to the southern Thailand, and I think it was southern Thailand. I was caught for 2 hours, and I was check everything, the book, everything, and I said I don't know how to read the book. It's from friends in southern Thailand, and since then,
Yes.
Sila, many
Yes.
times I come to Singapore, it's always a security check. I think my name is already blacklist that I am part of the southern Thailand. And I was like, oh my God, this is already
Wow.
been a long time ago, but it's all
Yeah.
I always been caught to the corner.
And what happens at the end?
Well, I think it was like 2010, and I went to Singapore. I think maybe 5 years ago, and now it's shorter, and now it's not scary. In the first time, it was so scary.
I'm sorry
But
about that.
but then whenever I came to Europe, for example, nothing check, nothing screening, but it only happened in Singapore. It's I think they have I think my
The
file is there
database.
already.
Well, as long as they keep filling up the file with what actually they see, I'm sure they will
Yeah,
get this sorted
they,
out.
yeah,
So let
yes,
it be. It's coming from their perspective. It's not
that's
how you
right.
react. It's how they
Yes.
react. So let it be
I
for a
need
while.
I need to increase what do I care, not to create, not
Yes.
fearful,
Yeah,
dealing with this.
sure.
All right.
Exactly. Okay. So let's stop here. Tonan, do you have any questions about the administration of the OneDrive?
No, so far I don't have, but I need to
Yes.
process a little bit and I get back to you if I have
Okay,
more.
because you raised some concerns the last time. Are
Yeah.
you feeling better about it now?
I need to test out again. I didn't spend time last week to focus on that. So let me
Okay.
check and get back to
Yes.
everyone if
Yes.
there's.
You can get back to the admin groups with your queries and then do screenshots and say, I don't understand this, or what do I need to do here? All right. Another quick question about the marketing. What's your sense about what do we need to be thinking about?
I think so. On the marketing side, I think no, there's some lesson we can improve, right? I think last week what we did is we posted on the page, and I noticed that I think that we got the attention from people, even though it's just a small size. Like in the system thinking page and also the training program page, there are some people who signed up for that. So it worked in a way to attract people. But at the end, the show up rate is not that. So let's think a little bit how we can reach our increase more. Yeah.
Yes. So in terms of broadcasting, what's your suggestion? How often and when should we do the broadcasting?
It's like this, right? Every 2 weeks, we do like this.
Do we start from tomorrow? Like tomorrow we do one broadcast? Or today we do one broadcast and then next Sunday another broadcast? Should it be Sunday or should it be during the week?
When you say broadcast, what does that mean?
That means to do the posting.
The video
Post on
post.
the groups. No, your marketing posts.
Yeah. Let's do tomorrow on Monday. I mean, like, so it's happened like every 2 weeks, right? Like after, like for example, after today, then we can start
Yes.
announcing for the next one.
Yes. So when is LinkedIn the busiest? Is it Monday or is it Tuesday and Wednesday?
Monday. We can do Monday.
Okay, just check when is LinkedIn busy, because I think LinkedIn is busier on Tuesday and Wednesday. It's like Monday,
Alright.
people are getting to work, and then it's easier for them to get onto LinkedIn on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. And
Shall we
they're
do
usually at that time, 10 o'clock, that's when they're on.
Yeah. Shall we do on Wednesday? Is what the date has
Yeah,
we
think-
found out last time.
Yeah, at
Wednesday.
least 2 times.
Yeah.
Yes, and this is where, if you can sit with Huda, if there were today's session, there were some highlights of today's session. Don't build it on the flyer, but in the comments page, the comments part of the flyer, those who've gone through the program can add their views.